Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everyone. Your voice is so important. And I don't just mean the thing we hear. It's what you say and how you say it. Your communication, so essential in everything, everyday life. It could be your business. It could be your career. It could be your personal relationships. Let's fine tune your communication. And part of that starts with proper storytelling. There's a story in everything. Think about it for a second. There really is. There's a chronological order of things. There's something to be told. You could gotten a bill today and they made a mistake. You're telling a friend, guess what? There's a story in that. She is a storytelling coach and helps many people craft their communication. Today, we're going to talk about brainstorming. Actually pick up from where we left off with Michelle Cutler. How you doing today?
I'm really well. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you back here. Yeah, we started into the brainstorming session, and I loved it last time because we just brought up a random scenario, hypothetical, came out of nowhere. And then we were volleying back and forth and building a story out of it. And it was really cool. It was very impromptu. We didn't even plan doing it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's the best way to approach brainstorming, actually, or coming up with ideas, generating your own ideas, is to not have a particular goal in mind, like the end point. I mean, it's nice to have a few, or if you are under a deadline, of course, you might have an end point. But, the thing I've realized I've been stressing over all of these weeks is that to not censor yourself or edit yourself, to not say this is probably wrong or this might not be right. Any of those thoughts that come into your mind really hinder your creativity, and your unique creativity is what fuels your unique voice, right? It's the way you process the world and the language you choose to communicate your experiences or your observations, or like we were speaking about with parables, like what's the lesson learned, or what's the lesson you thought you were going to learn and you ended up with something else. And so brainstorming, I think, really helps to jog the mind. At the same time, there are some tools you can use to sort of put yourself in a place and observe things you wouldn't otherwise. But yeah, I think having someone to spitball with is great. And then there are things you can also do on your own to then bring to that meeting or bring to that session.
So is there a formula for the story to be told? We could pick up where we left off, any scenario, whatever it might be. Should you be thinking about what the end result is, how the story is going to end, or is there supposed to be a lesson in the story? Should there be an intention set before you craft the story in your mind, or even before you tell it?
Well, like I said, I think you might start with one, but being open to it changing is important. But yeah, of course, it helps to start if you have a prompt. Like I have a Substack, which is a platform like Medium, but it's like you sort of publish your own work. And I did 52 micro memoirs, like short, very short flash stories last year. Each week was a new story, and it ended with a prompt for the reader. And the readers would then, in the comments, write their story based on the theme. So if the theme, I started out with truth. I felt truth was a good theme to start with, considering the times we were in about a year ago. And then we would move on to regret, or we would move on to confusion, or we would move on to romance, right? So when you take one, some people do prompts with a question. They pose a question. Usually it's a what if, or think about a time when and I think when there's something is posed as a question, you might start to feel that there's a right or wrong answer, or a yes or no type of answer. But when you start to think about just the word confusion, and think about all of the times that you've had a moment where what's important, for confusion to happen, let's say you have to have believed in something first. So you believe in the truth of something, and then you become confused because it turns out to not be that way. So confusion, for example, can yield many, many ideas. a prompt based on a theme can yield many ideas. And I think then when you start to feel like you want to write something, you work on something as simple, but it's not so simple, as your five senses, right? So you've got your five senses, and usually we describe what we see. That's like our go-to, is describing what we see. But if you were to hold off and describe what you see last, so if you're sitting in a space, if you're in your car right now, driving somewhere, or you're at work, or you're home, whatever you're doing, and you just pause for a moment and listen, just listen to sounds, and then write about what you hear. Spend time yourself for a minute only writing about sound. And then what about temperature? What about scent, like what you smell? What about maybe the taste, or something in the back of your throat? You smell some kind of detergent or something or cigarette from a few days ago. Like
Hmm.
all the different little things that you're aware of when you're not thinking exactly about describing what you see. If you leave what you see to last, you'll see that you've already created quite a lot of context, quite a lot of story before you even describe what you see. And I think these are good ways to like flex your muscles a bit, like as if you're going to the gym or something. It doesn't have to be, you don't do like bicep curls or plank because you're going to go stand out in the world and do bicep curls or plank, but you might need to use your core strength for doing something important. These are all things that become integrated in your movement. And so your power of observation, the way you write about what you experience, can be a muscle as well, a complex muscle. That's not just what you see, or you know what I mean? It's, you sort of spin it around from another direction. And again, find things that you aren't the first thing you see, the first thing you hear. Go for the second or the third thing that you notice or idea that you have.
Is it impactful to practice with somebody else? Like, for example, I'm going back to how we were riffing last week and maybe the time before that, where we just brought up stories, like almost like a comedian, where it's impromptu, where it's just, yeah, all right, here you walked into a Starbucks, they got your order wrong, and go. And you need to tell a story. Maybe it's based on, or maybe it's based on something in your life. Like I would ask you, what's the last most impactful story you told, or something like that. Is that
Yeah.
helpful? Question number one. Question number two, how do you edit? How do you even edit on the fly to keep it short, interesting, and just, very lasered?
Yeah. Well, so for the first question about I think working with someone else, especially someone like me, because I would be there to help you to get, it would be less of a give and take and more of a give from me. I would be giving more. I think when you are doing something in a workshop or maybe a partner,
Mm.
there's that quid pro quo type of thing, which is great because you want to give and you want to get at the same time. When you work with someone like me, we would be spending, the lion's share of time and conversation on your ideas, your project, your stories.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it helps to have a listener. It helps to have someone listening. As I've said before, I think it helps to feel safe in that environment so that you can really talk, and not feel that you are being self-editorial or judging yourself. But then to get to your second question, which is, can you edit? Can you edit on the fly? Can you tell this story knowing that you need it to be more succinct, or knowing that you'll only have a minute or two of attention? And definitely you can. It really helps, again, to practice, though. I mean, practicing is where it all comes through, whether you practice with a voice recorder,
Mm.
practice with another person, practice in a group, practice with a coach. I think that helps to, you hear yourself while you're talking too. You hear yourself. And when you're writing, it's a different, again, writing and speaking are different forms of storytelling.
I have always in my career, everything I've done, I'm, I'm coming up with a way to position this, making sure the story you tell, even the post you place, there's a story there too, very short one. passes the who gives a blank test. I don't know if
Mhm.
that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
is anybody going to care? Is it going to make a difference? Is it going to be impactful? Is somebody going to say, "Wow, really?" Or that was interesting, or in their mind say, "I'm glad they told me that."
Mhm.
Do you, I want to say I wrestle with that, but it's almost automatic. Like I just think of it before I even share anything. Is that important as well?
Well, it's funny. I've tried, so I'm not afraid of Facebook. I'm not afraid of social media. I feel pretty good about how I use it and what I get out of it.
Sure.
And so I I do pay attention sort of analytically to what posts or what statements, what stories get more response and which ones just somehow end up slipping through the cracks. Of course, some of that's an algorithm, how the algorithms work in social media, but it's also kind of an interesting gauge to see where do people, I mean, we assume people don't have a lot of attention span right now. Like they just,
Yes.
if you're going to sit down and read, like if I'm going to read a novel, um, I would probably tuck myself away to read a novel. I would not be thinking back and forth. There'd be no brainstorming. It's not communication. I'm sort of the consumer. I'm reading a book. I'm consuming the story myself. Um, but in cases where you have, just a few minutes or just an interaction or just a one phone call to to leave an impact, for example, the well, I forgot. And now I forgot the question. Where were you at the question?
Well, you're making
It was
sure
quiz part two. It was part two.
oh, part two
I
is the
think we just gave
self-edit.
an example.
The
Yeah, exactly. So
self-edit.
we just gave an example of how that didn't work. Like I was trying to self-edit and I then thought, what am I actually trying to say? So I think in the end, I think it's the practice. It's really the practice, testing things out, seeing where people actually respond. You can hear it in the room, when you're speaking, you can hear when people pause, they want to listen. You can tell when you're on the phone with someone or in a meeting when you've got the floor, not just because you pushed your voice forward, but you actually have people's attention.
Hmm. I'm trying to I want to tell a story. I want to put it to the test.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of a topic. I don't know. If they ask me a question, I'll come up with something, maybe career related. Um, it's almost like so many game shows. I'm trying to think of, I see the actors where they were, pressed to tell a story. Sometimes they had to tell it with, gestures and things like that. But I feel that the practicing it really makes a difference, whether you're going to bounce it on somebody else, whether you're going to record yourself. Certainly, if you type it or write it, there's some easier self-editing there as opposed to telling it on the fly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's you need to find somebody to work with. Well, that's you. Really what it comes
That's
down
me.
to. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, also you can say like what you're just saying about writing things down or doing, like I said, I've become a fan of the voice recorder, to use it not as a way, it's not, that's the difference between me composing as a writer and me generating ideas, right? So when I'm generating ideas, I just free flow into voice recorder. I transcribe it and then I can search for keywords. I think it's important, even if you're writing in your journal, to type your notes and your ideas into a Word document and start to create like your database for subject matter. So let's say we talked last week, we were doing the orange juice and toothpaste brainstorm, right?
Mhm.
And so you could, if we had recorded that and then we transcribed it, we could look for some keywords in there,
Mm.
flavor, mint, right? We could look drinks, products, or barbecue sauce, all the different things that we discussed. And then when you're in your own laptop, you can, and you have an opportunity, oh, what was that idea I had about, the new cocktail? Or what was that idea I had about sending my material to these producers somewhere? Whatever it was, this idea you had, you can go into you can search it in your own IP, your own search engine, which is your computer holding your documents of your ideas. Um, that's a very good way to not to not fear having nothing to say or to fear the blank page. I think there are times when you're asked to write something and you're like, oh gosh, it's a blank page, right? Or like you were saying, your mind can go blank in a moment. Tell me something. I don't know, but I think if, let's say, we looked at this idea of confusion, for example, like I had an experience where my mother was scheduled for a particular procedure and we wanted to cancel it with the doctor. And at the same time, our dog had been bitten by another dog, and had to get stitches removed. So in my mother's phone were two phone numbers, one for a veterinarian and one for the doctor. But she couldn't remember she didn't know which one was which because it was just the phone number without an ID. And she had a medical person make a phone call on her behalf to change her appointment for a colonoscopy. And by the end, they realized they were talking to the vet. And of course, a vet does not do colonoscopies on dogs, right? But everyone was being so polite for so long that the confusion wasn't clear until I said, I think we're talking to the wrong person, right? So like confusion can be a lot of fun. So if you have something that you can think of where you are confused about something.
I totally. One of my
Okay.
most embarrassing radio career moments, interviewing Rod Stewart by telephone, just released a new album. He's on the phone. Hey, Rod, how's it going? How's everything with you? Oh, fantastic. How's Kelly doing? There's a pause. Waiting. Rod, hi. Can you hear me? Hello, Rod. Hello. Rod, are you there? Click. I'm like, what happened? 38 seconds. My Rod Stewart interview. And then I processed what happened. He had just gotten married. Kelly was his ex-wife.
Oh, so clear. There you go.
It didn't
A little bit
go
of
over well.
confusion.
A little bit of confusion. And I realized, oh no, that was the other one, not the new one. And he was going through a battle with the ex at the time. It was the shortest radio celebrity interview I ever did.
That's
38 seconds.
hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was confused. And I was a little like, excited, slightly nervous. I got Rod Stewart on the phone. Oh my
Sure.
God, this is gonna be great, fantastic. Oh, we're gonna talk about everything. Maybe I'll get him to sing. This will be fantastic. No. So definitely
Well,
confused.
so that's kind of a funny example of sort of over preparing, or you were so prepared for what you were hoping to happen, like the expectation of what could happen, that the part about preparing, like that detail, that one detail, or his bio, updated bio kind of
Right.
thing.
Right. I thought I had it. Yeah, that's easy. That's, okay, that's coming out of my subconscious. Don't even have to worry about that part. I need to really focus on his new project, make him happy to talk about it, your favorite song on the album and all of that. And yeah, I'll never forget that one. The confusion. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you
Yeah.
pick a topic in your mind, you can come up with many different things. If I think a little bit more, I probably come up with another confusion story at some point. That one just stands out, for me.
I'm sure that's a story that you could tell many times because it's so impressive and
Yeah.
also like a total fail at the same
Total
time.
fail. Yeah. I mean, a funny fail. And, the peel the layers back, pull out the curtains. We pre-record many interviews anyway, just in case there's a phone issue, or maybe when you're on the radio, it doesn't time out with the person's schedule. So let's say I do a morning show, Rod Stewart's only available at 4:15 p.m. Eastern. So I already had it in the can. It was already recorded, but I promoted it. We're going to be talking to Rod Stewart tomorrow. It's going to be great. So everybody, tuned in to hear Rod Stewart. 38 seconds, done. Yeah. But so yeah, that happens a lot in radio. A lot of times things aren't done live. Rarely. There's
Yeah.
some, but especially with callers, there's always a delay, and it's usually never live because nobody wants to take a chance. Somebody's saying something and all of that.
Right. Right.
Side
Right.
note. Yeah. What?
One other thing. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted it before we run out of time. We have a question from
Okay.
somebody that reached out, and let me find it here. Erica is asking, what does a typical coaching session with you look like?
Sure. Usually, let's say someone would get in touch with me through my website. It's and just say, why are you getting in touch? It's a very open question. Usually my response begins with a series of questions on my side, which like a questionnaire, based on what they want to work on. So everything I do is tailored to the person and what it is that they want to work on. I use the questionnaire so that I can prepare for a first call, whether it's a 15-minute just sort of discovery call, or if it's an actual booking of a strategy session, which is like an hour and 15 minutes, but we have a couple of hours of prep and research so that I can be super specific about my questions and conflicting projects. Let's say you have an idea for something. I want to go and see how many others have the same idea. How can your idea be different? What are some possible outlets for this idea? And then we do the call, which again is a lot of me asking questions and follow-up questions, but giving space for the person to really share what it is they haven't been able to share otherwise. How are we going to unlock the secrets? And then after the call, I prepare something called golden notes, which are really actionable items, takeaways from the call. So, often you'll do a Zoom with somebody and they'll say, oh, you get the recording, and they send you the recording. But the recording isn't very useful. It's exactly the experience you just had while you were listening. What's useful is having the content of that call broken out into steps. Like, these are things you could do. These are places you could research. These are things to follow up on, right? So that instead of coming out of the call thing like that was a lot of times what happens is it feels like we're hanging out. It's like, but it's extremely productive. Like the most
we are
productive hanging out. Yeah, exactly. Just like super productive hanging out with goals. What are your objectives? It's a strategy session. But that you walk away with at least a one sheet of follow-ups of things you can do. And then I will always follow up from there. And again, if I now know what your project is or your interests, as I'm out in the world doing things and I see a call for something or anything that's related to what you're doing, I'm going to share it with you. So I like to follow up again with real concrete follow-up rather than, thumbs up, hope everything's good. Of course I do. But I feel like it's easy to get swept up in the process, and then you're left on your own again. And that's why I then do development sessions, like a series of sessions. If you want to have a longer project, if it's a written, again, the difference between a written outcome and a verbal outcome, what's the final product? What's the final product? How fast can we get there? Do we need to, maybe we want to take time. Maybe it's something where we have to really mine history or mine, a particular event that happened that just you haven't been able to shake off yet. And you're not exactly sure why it's that meaningful to you, but you can't shake it. I'm about to work with someone who has a story like that, where it was a very pivotal experience in their young adulthood that really shaped everything and changed everything for the rest of their life, for who they are now. And she wants to know, and we're about to have our first session to discuss, how is this one particular event, what's the container for it? Is it an essay about that? Is it the beginning of a memoir? Is it a chapter in another book about events like this? So, it's one thing to delve into the descriptions and the dialogue and conflict and all of these things that make a story really great, and pacing. But again, remember, what's the takeaway? What is the reader or the listener walking away with? I started out in film and screenwriting and movies, and you always think about when the lights go down, what's the first thing to come up on the screen? And then again at the end, when the credits roll and people are sitting in the dark, what's happening there? What are they taking away from that 2 hours they've just given you, for your movie or to read your book or to read your essay? There's always stories And I think I even did this too in college at one point. And I don't remember the book, but I read a book and I remember getting to the last page and just throwing it against the wall and being like, that cannot be the ending, And
Yeah.
it was a classic, one of the classics or something. I mean, it's a cliche, but it does happen. I know people who actually have done that. I've done it where you're just like, what?
That's
So I
exactly
think
what I was thinking of. That's exactly what I was thinking of when the credits roll. And you never want to leave somebody saying, and everybody takes something different away from something. I could see the same movie, read the same book and say, oh, it was pretty good. And then somebody else would say, oh, it was horrible. How could they even do that? But for the most part, you want to leave them feeling something, maybe
Yeah.
that they invested time and it was well worth it. And certainly I never even thought of, when the lights go down, the first thing that they're exposed to, what's it going to, how are you setting this up? The establishing shot. We're out of time. I just keep going. This is fun. This is, like you said, we're just hanging out and kind of rolling things along there. But this is, it's all part of the process. It should be fun. How do we connect with you? Somebody wants to up their communication game, learn a little bit more about storytelling. How do they do that?
Yeah, I have a website, which is www.michellecutler.com, which is MICHELLECUTLER. And there it breaks out different services. It also has a portfolio page of the work I've done in various mediums, either screenplays or essays or commercials, advertising. And I have a new tab on my website called Podcast, which actually has all of our recordings, all of our podcasts that we've done together, and some more that I'm going to be a guest host on. So, or no, not a guest host, a guest speaker. So there's some interactive things on my website as well, prompts, newsletter, sign up. And that's really the best way to get in touch with me. And I'm, 24/7, I will be answering emails.
I had no idea. I must have missed that tab with samples and things you've done in other mediums. So I'm definitely going to go check that out. Super cool.
Yep.
Wow. All right. Thank you so much for being here today. A lot of fun.
My pleasure, always.
Same here. Appreciate it. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.